John and Ken show continues. John Cobelt and Ken Champeau. This is a great story written in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend. We have it highlighted on the website. It's Alicia Finley interviewed Joel Kotkin. You may have heard his name. He's quoted frequently and interviewed frequently. Professor at Chapman University in Orange, urban studies professor, studies and writes on demographic and geographic trends for 30 years. And this a bombshell of a story. He has counted 4 million more people leaving California in the last 20 years than have come from other states.
Yeah, this is state-to-state migration.
There's nothing to do with
California's population has increased in the last 20 years. That's largely through immigration, both legal and illegal.
This is
people moving state to state, and it used to be that so many other people would want to come to California for their dream.
Most are young families. Adults, 34 to 45, kids between the ages of 5 and 14. 4 million people left California, American citizens, young, middle-class families, out the door.
Now, part of the reason is that state and local governments have restricted development. So the policies have artificially limited housing supply and put a premium on real estate in coastal regions, the more desirable places to live. While many middle-class families have moved inland, those regions don't have the same allure or amenities as the coast. People might as well move to Nevada or Texas, where housing and everything else is cheaper, and there's no income tax, and that's what people have done.
I remember probably about 15 years ago, we had a couple, was our friends, and they had a couple of kids, and they lived in Manhattan Beach, which is a really nice place to live. But their house was relatively small, and he got transferred to Texas, and they bought, for less money, a gigantic home in a development. Wow. I mean, the size of the home for less money than their little box in Manhattan Beach, it was astounding.
He says things are only going to get worse because Democratic Governor Jerry Brown and his green cadre implement their smart growth plans, which will cram us into high-density housing. Kotkin said, what I find reprehensible beyond belief is that people pushing high-density housing themselves live in single-family homes and often drive very fancy cars, but they want everyone else to live like my grandmother did in Brownsville and Brooklyn in the 1920s.
This is what the hypocrisy among this crowd is so disgusting. It's Schwarzenegger jamming a greenhouse gas bill that's going to drive energy prices through the roof at the same time he's flying a jet plane around. Mary Nichols is a rich woman. She wants us to live in tenements, apartments. There's no doubt that the restrictions on developing land along the coast has made the price of homes skyrocket. And the middle class has said, hey, go to Riverside, where the homes are still too expensive. So, yeah, they leave. I mean, there's a reason you have 4 million young families, 4 million people, most of them young families, leaving in 20 years. What's the first thing you worry about when you're a parent with young kids? What kind of house can I afford? What are the schools like? How long is it to drive to work?
So while some young families may have rejected the notion of living in one of those sprawling housing complexes in Rancho Cucamonga, instead they said, let's just go to Nevada. Imagine now what's going to happen when Jerry Brown and Mary Nichols say, no, you have to live in some sort of high-rise apartment building right near some sort of mass transit center so you can get on high-speed rail or a bus or a bicycle or walk to work. So you no longer – those people are going to outright reject this and leave for another state. The migration is going to be worse.
We told you that Jerry Brown and Mary Nichols hate suburban living. They hate that you want to live in a detached home with a yard, a swimming pool, and a driveway. They hate that. You want your kids to play in a cul-de-sac. They want you living on the 6th or 16th floor of a high-rise.
And they think they're smart, futuristic urban planners.
And Kotkin,
but it's going to destroy even more the middle class of this state.
And Kotkin says housing is one of the fronts of the progressive war on the middle class. The new regime running California, quote, wants to destroy the essential reason why people move to California in order to protect their own lifestyles. Now, this is not shock jock talk here, okay? This is a mustached professor who's been watching this for 30 years, he knows Jerry Brown. He's friends with him, voted for him. And he's calling Brown's government a regime that wants to destroy the essential reasons people come to California. He says that Brown is conducting a progressive war on the middle class.
He says that Jerry Brown really believes in this green stuff. Because he also writes this cap and trade law, which we've talked about before, the Global Warming Final Solutions Act, also known as AB 32, which we could not get beaten back at the ballot a couple of years ago, will raise the cost of energy and drive out manufacturing jobs without even making a dent in global carbon emissions.
This is what have we been telling you about for years. All those people, like in Santa Monica, I saw the signs on their lawn when we were trying to repeal Schwarzenegger's law. And they said, don't let the greedy oil companies win. We said it's not going to make any difference in global warming, even if you believe in it. That's what Kotkin's saying. It's not going to make any difference. What
it is going to make difference is in your energy bills.
We told you your energy bills are going to skyrocket. That's what he says. We told you that manufacturing jobs are going to flee the state. That's what he says. This is a guy who spends all his days at a desk staring at a computer, working on spreadsheets, watching the demographic trends. He's telling you in a soft voice what we've been telling you in a loud voice for all these years. You people vote for things and support things that are absurd.
He also mentions a separate piece of legislation. That's the one that's going to require the state's utilities to get their energy from renewable sources, like wind and sun. A third, 33% has to come from the wind and the sun. By the year 2020, California's electricity prices are already 50% higher than the national average. And the people behind this initiative to make us get the renewable energy already know, and they've admitted, your bill is going to go up. So I've read by as much as 20 to 25%.
So if you're already paying 50% more than anybody else, and they're demanding wind and solar power be an ever-increasing share of our energy, wind and solar power are far more expensive than conventional means of generating electricity.
Because they're not efficient.
This is all written into law that the legislature has passed or that you voted for on the ballot. I mean, you've screwed yourselves royally for electricity bills.
And then the last good shot he takes is the high-speed rail. Kotkin calls the runaway cost train classic California. Where Jerry Brown with the state going bankrupt is even thinking about an expenditure like this is beyond comprehension. The schools are falling apart. The roads are falling apart. The bridges are unsafe. The state economy is in free fall. We're still doing much worse than the rest of the country. We've got this growing permanent welfare class, and high-speed rail is going to solve this? Yeah, this is the only idea on the block for some sort of futuristic vision to build high-speed rail.
Can anyone dispute anything he says? Are the schools not falling apart? Especially in Los Angeles? Are the roads not falling apart? The bridges? Is the state economy not in free fall? Don't we have a permanent welfare class? 1/3 of all the welfare cases in the nation? And he's boosting high-speed rail? Do you see how crazy this is? Again, we've been telling you this for years because it's right under our nose, but now we're backed up by the state's leading demographic analyst for the last 30 years, Joel Kotkin. Guy says he's a Democrat.
So go check it out. It's on the website. Get everybody you know to read it. KFIAM640.com, the John and Ken page.
KFI is on a need-to-know basis. And boy, do you need to know.